Let me read to you a passage from the 9th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verse 35 up to chapter 10, verses 1, 5 and 6 to 8. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the first week of Advent. St. Matthew writes, Jesus went around to all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and curing every disease and illness. At the sight of the crowds, his heart was moved with pity for them, because they were troubled and abandoned, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the labourers are few. So ask the master of the harvest to send out labourers for his harvest." Then he summoned his 12 disciples and sent them out after instructing them thus, "Go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, make this proclamation, the kingdom of heaven is at hand." That's most of the passage from Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 to chapter 10, verses 1, 5 and 6 to 8. I didn't read all of it because it's a long passage. But what does it suggest to us? Well, two things we notice very clearly about our Lord in that gospel passage I've just read. Firstly, we cannot help but observe his compassion for the crowds. We read that his heart was moved with pity for them, because they were troubled and abandoned, like sheep without a shepherd. Our Lord's heart is the heart of God. And this is the whole point of devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The Gospels tell us what moves the heart of Christ, and how greatly moved his heart was and is. It is sin, understood in its broadest sense, which caused the trouble and abandonment of the crowds. Their personal sins caused it, their dislocation from God caused it, the world, so affected by sin, caused it, the entire fallen condition into which man is born caused it. As a result of sin, man is troubled and abandoned, and the response of God is one of pity. God became man because of his pity, his holy compassion, which resolved to enter the lists to combat all the troubles and ruins man. We remember how, when our Lord arrived at the grave of Lazarus, he wept. Many who saw this said, "Look how he loved him." Our Lord was moved by the tragedy of mankind, who was so much under the power of death, death which is the wage of sin. And as we consider not only the spectacle of the world which confronted our Lord, but the world as it is in every age, how ruined is the handiwork of God. Consider the history of wars during the last couple of centuries, say, since the outbreak of the French Revolution. Consider the mayhem and unleashing of furies in various parts of the world today. Consider the situation in parts of Africa and in the Middle East, of course. What is the response of God? God's response is one of holy horror at sin and compassion for what the Gospel calls the crowds, because they are troubled and abandoned. The second point we may well notice is that our Lord directed his 12 to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He himself was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, as he told the pleading Canaanite woman in another part of the Gospel. Of course, just before he ascended into heaven, he instructed his disciples to go to the whole world and make disciples of every nation. But the very fact that our Lord himself was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel shows us the special place which reclaiming the vast numbers of non-practicing members of the Church's faithful ought have in the efforts of the serious Christian. For instance, the majority of Catholic people in the world do not practice their Catholic faith very much, and considerable numbers not at all. Consider Australia, consider Britain, Spain, France, consider Italy, and say the predominantly Catholic countries of South America, what percentage of Catholic people attend Mass each Sunday and receive the sacrament of reconciliation regularly? There is a vast mission ahead of the Church to reach out and evangelize the lost sheep of the house of Israel. There are wonderfully promising things happening in the life of the Church at this juncture in history. We need only think of the past century of outstanding modern popes, or the blossoming of movements and communities of spiritual life and evangelization, the marvelous harvest of vocations in countries such as Mexico and Poland. But the house of Israel, the Church herself that is, requires much Christ-like compassion, the compassion which Christ felt for the crowds. Our Lord said to his disciples that the harvest is abundant but the labourers are few. So ask the Master of the harvest to send out labourers to his harvest. We ought pray for vocations. We ought pray for our parishes. We ought pray that the Lord of the harvest will bring a springtime to the Church, the new Pentecost, so hoped for by the popes of our time. One of the earliest encyclicals written by Pope John Paul II was on the mercy of God. Its title was God Rich in Mercy. In that encyclical, he invited the Church's faithful to meditate on the mercy of God and to embody it and to make it present in their activity. Let us prayerfully consider the compassionate mercy of our Lord in the Gospel passage that I read earlier, and ask for the grace to make Christ present in our persons in daily life.